My name is Peter Jensen. I live in the city of Odense in Denmark. One day, about 2.5 years ago, I was sitting in a large group of people. It was in a big room, a bit like a tent, on a site not so far from Jericho in the Jordan Valley. We were there for 1 week to learn about communication and to practice it. And there were people from Palestine, from Israel, and from other countries. This afternoon, we were sitting in a big circle and we were talking about the conflict in Israel and Palestine and sharing stories. And there was a man from Israel who talked about his life. As a very small child, he came with his parents from Europe and immigrated to Israel. This was in the time just after 48. And by the authorities in Israel, they were given a house in a bigger town, a house that was empty after an Arab Palestinian family had fled. And he talked about how difficult it was for him and his family to make this house their home, knowing that it belonged to somebody else. And when he started going to school, it was difficult for him to make friends. There was a feeling of shame and there was a feeling of loneliness. And he carried this with him further on in his life. And this afternoon was the first time that he talked openly about it. And I think he was in his 60s. As he was talking, I saw that he was crying, and every now and then he stopped. People in the circle were very quiet. At one point there was a man from Palestine who got up with a loud cry. He left the room, and later he came back and shared with us what was touched in him by this man's story. When I was listening to this man's story, the man from Israel, I was thinking about my childhood and a feeling of shame. And this had to do with me believing in God, that God existed. For me, God's existence was natural. And then when I started going to school, I found out that most of my classmates did not believe in God. For them, God did not exist. And I was afraid of being laughed at or feeling outside, being considered not normal. So I chose to hide my faith in God and not talk about it. Only when I was a young adult, I was able to talk more openly and more freely about my faith. And even today, every now and then, I automatically begin to protect myself and avoid the subject of God. Now, all this was going on in me as I was listening to the man. And I didn't share about this in the large circle, but afterwards I had the chance to talk with a single person about it. And I don't think she did anything, she just listened to me, and I talked about this and felt a great relief. Now, when I think about this whole experience today, I feel quiet and serious. I can feel that things are still moving in me in relation to this. I feel sad, of course, because of the man's sad story, but even more so, I feel joy, because there is something in this that has to do with truth and clarity, that things are being brought out, that they become visible. And that when they are brought out, then things start to change. And there's also something in it that has to do with community and, change and hope. My request for you who watch this is if you will consider sharing one of your stories that has to do with the conflict in Israel and Palestine. And it could be that you live there in the area and experience something almost every day, or it could be that you live abroad and still experience some of the consequences of this conflict. So this is my request for you, if you will share one of your stories.